First, we have to finish compatibilism, contemporary compatibilism or compatibilism 2.0. This is Harry Frankfurt's compatibilism. He talks about second order desires. And Susan Wolf, we talked about her. Regarding the second order desires, she said she came up with this thing called real self theory. What are we? What are we? We are desires we identify with. That is how we establish our identity. And Frankfurt, he says a critical component of moral responsibility is whether we identify with our actions and motives. So with this, Frankfurt, actually, I'm going to use the word introvert. He introverts the issue of free will. Introvert meaning he turns the thing within a person. So it becomes an internal matter. Free will becomes an internal matter. So we talked about the drug addicts, a billionaire who wants to give money away to the poor, the refugees, the starving. But is the act of giving the money what is good, or is his motivation, the internal motivation that we judge as to whether what he's doing is good or bad? And I think commonsensically we recognize what is in his heart, as we say. What is in his heart is the thing that matters in terms of what is moral and what is immoral. It's the idea is of us looking into the mirror and what we see, honestly, what we see, like within ourselves. That is how Frankfurt inverts the issue of free will. So the advantages of Frankfurt's compatibilism. Classical compatibilism says freedom is the ability to do what we want, but that is freedom of action, not freedom of will. This was, with Hume, we said this is what we consider freedom of spontaneity, freedom of indifference. It's spontaneity. Frankfurt's account is consistent with determinism. What matters is acting on the desires you identify with, even if that desire is itself externally caused. So it's not within my control to be a round stone or a flat stone. That is the external causation, right? But it's my nature to roll. That's like me exercising my free will, right? It's my nature to roll because I'm a round stone, or it's my nature not to roll, but to, stay put in one place if I'm a flat slab. I can choose to be the devil, so the issue of devil and the angel on our shoulders, right? I can choose to be the devil or choose to be the angel, one to be good, one to be bad. This is like Charles Campbell's soul, but the soul is now replaced with the second order desire. So we have the same situation as what Charles Campbell was saying, the third way. But he has to say it's a mystery. I cannot explain how that third way is possible, but Frankfurt naturalizes the whole situation. He's saying it's just our psychology, our second order desire. So it's a neat way to take libertarian arguments of free will and turn it into sort of modern day psychology. And animals have freedom of action, but they lack freedom of will because they lack the capacity for second order desires. And we talked about this, right? And therefore, we do not imbue any animal with moral accountability. Basically, what we're saying is animals are dumb, right? They're too stupid to be moral. Being moral is in some ways then a sign of intelligence, right? We human beings are intelligent enough that we can take a step back, become self-aware, and we have developed through, I guess, evolutionary adaptations, maybe through civilization, primitive, society that we live in as cavemen, somehow we develop this capacity for second order desires. And hence, that becomes the ground, the basis for moral accountability. His account gives the right answer to the locked door problem. We had this problem before, right? The thought experiment. The woman is in the locked room. She can't leave the room because the door is locked, but she wants to stay in the room. Then she has freedom. She is exercising her free will. Even if it turns out she can't have that freedom of spontaneity, the ability to do otherwise, she cannot do otherwise, but she still has freedom of will. So it explains this kind of thought experiment neatly. His compatibilism 2.0 internalizes the concept of free will. It's basically what we say, have your cake and eat it too. I think I had trouble with this before. I'm pretty sure we're still being recorded. I'm just gonna double check. Sorry. Yeah, that means we're still being recorded. Yeah, so that's fine. That's fine. Am I going to edit this out? Probably not. Uh, okay. Have your cake and eat it too. Um, this is saying Frankfurt's compatibilism 2.0 works with determinism. Everything happens according to the law of causality, right? But we still get to have free will. A reduced kind of free will. It's not the libertarian free will. It is a reduced kind of free will, but it is free will nevertheless. So that is compatibilism. Before I start on the consequences, and this is a full lecture as well, so I do have to move on. But before I move on, does anyone have any questions? Okay, let's move on to the consequences. So what we're doing today is first we talk about what's called the basic argument and its relationship to morality, and what are the consequences of having a hard determinist view of free will, and what are the consequences of having a compatibilist view of free will, and lastly, what are the consequences of having a libertarian view of the free will. And I say response because the basic argument is basically it's an argument for determinism against free will, right? So how does the hard determinist respond to the basic argument? Compatibilist respond to it. Libertarian respond to the basic argument. Free will, as we said right at the beginning, is important in a way that was not pertinent to the first question that we dealt with, what is real? The question of what is real isn't immediate in our lives, right? Whatever reality is, it doesn't affect us immediately, but free will does, because free will is closely connected with morality. And we are all moral creatures, we think, right? So that's why free will is important in a way that a question like what is real isn't. So we live in this deterministic universe, but compatibilism says, sure, deterministic universe is fine, but we can also have free will. So beliefs have consequences. Beliefs have consequences. Not all beliefs. Certain beliefs don't really have any consequences. Some beliefs, I think I said, like love and life, I'll talk about this. Some beliefs are very consequential, others not. My belief about ants, for example, I'm giving you this visual here. I just realized this thing isn't turned on. Let me just, that's interesting. Yeah. I'm sorry for you guys who couldn't look at anything here. So I'm giving you the visual of these ants. Let's say I believe ants have 8 legs. Sure, looks like they have 8 legs, right? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They have 8 legs. If you say, well, that's plainly wrong. Ants are not spiders, right? They have six legs. So my belief about the ants is wrong, right? So I say, well, what difference does it make? So my belief about the ants is wrong. It has no consequence in my life because ants have nothing to do with me, right? Other than, like I don't want to step on ants, because that seems evil to the ants. But let's say I have certain beliefs about love. I am an incurable romantic, like I am, your sort of elderly Romeo. I'm all for love. Love is the greatest thing in the world, right? That kind of belief will have consequences. Uh, oh no, the before that. What kind of consequences? Let's say I'm like Jack, I believe, Jack in the movie Titanic. Jack and Rose, who has seen the movie Titanic? Jack sacrifices himself for Rose. There's this thing that floats, right? And they both try to get on to the thing that's floating, and then they start to drown, right? So Jack lets Rose get on the I guess it's a door or something, and he tries to hold on, and then he freezes, and then he drowns. He sacrifices himself for the love of his life. You could turn around and say that was foolish of Jack because he was a foolish young man. He doesn't really know her, right? They've been together for like what, a few days? And he gave his life away because he believed that love was the most important thing. What if you had a different belief? You believe you need to take care of yourself first. You are the most important person in your life because I'm me, right? There's only one of me. There's only one Peter Lee in the world, right? So at the end of the day, I try to, be friendly, to be gracious and all that. But at the end of the day, I have to look out for me because my life is the most important thing to me. If I had that kind of view and I was Jack, right? I would say, I'm sorry, Rose, off you go, right? She drowns and I'll survive. And I'll go to the United States, I'll become a great man or something, right? So it has consequences. My belief in certain things will produce certain consequences, such is our view of free will. Frankfurt's compatibilism, we identify with second order desires, they establish our identity. We are who we want to be with our second order desires. But for libertarians, we are morally responsible only if we could have done otherwise. Therefore, for libertarians, their view of free will have different consequences than from someone like Frankfurt. So let's see what those differences could be. We're going to talk about Frankfurt cases. Um, I don't think I'll go through these because I don't want to run out of time. So basically, so these are just to show you that philosophers, they talk about Frankfurt cases. They come up with new, different versions of Frankfurt cases. These are thought experiments, different thought experiments, where a person cannot do otherwise, but we still think he has free will and he can do the right thing or the wrong thing. So this kind of thing is called Frankfurt cases, because according to the libertarian view of free will, if you cannot do otherwise, then you're not morally accountable for your actions. But according to Frankfurt, even though I cannot do otherwise, from what is inside of me, I can still be held accountable for my actions, whether my action is morally good or morally bad. So these are Frankfurt cases. So I'm just going to skip these things. And let's go to Peter, Paul, and Mary. So this is a thought experiment. I've changed some of the details, but it's basically a Frankfurt case. Peter, Paul, and Mary, let's say they're the best of friends. They've been together for many, many years. Actually, this is a group, Peter, Paul, and Mary, a singing group. But let's say Paul is Peter's best friend, childhood best friend, and Mary is Peter's wife. Okay, we're doing philosophy right now. Please think with me. So Peter and Paul, they're best friends. Mary is Peter's wife. Peter, Paul, and Mary, they're friends. Peter finds out that Mary is having an affair with Paul, his best friend. It's a shock to the system, right? Peter feels betrayed. He's furious, right? These bastards. I don't know whether he is more angry at his wife or at his best friend, right? Who should he be more angry at? His wife and his best friend having an affair behind his back. He's furious. Just at that moment when he finds out that they're having an affair, terrorists, they're in a hotel. They're staying at a hotel. Terrorists come into the hotel and they hold everyone hostage. Okay, this is the thought experiment. They hold everyone hostage. What's the picture? Yeah, they hold everyone hostage. And they tie one person up, and they say, we're going to play a game because these are terrorists, right? These are bad people. We're going to play a game. We're going to choose a random person and we're going to give him a gun with a single bullet. We're going to tell that person to shoot this guy that we have tied up on the chair, right? We're going to tell this person to shoot the man on the chair. If he does what we tell him to do, then that'll be it, right? That'll be the game for the day. But if the guy refuses our command and he refuses to kill the person on the chair, then we're going to kill 10 people. So that's the choice given to this random person that we'll choose, right? And it just so turns out the person the terrorists choose is Peter. They pick Peter randomly out of the crowd. And the person tied to the chair is Paul, his best friend. What are the odds? It's like the gods are playing a cruel game, right? What are the odds? So Peter comes out, they give him a gun with one bullet, and they say, point that gun at that man and shoot him in the head. And then that will save you 9 other people. But if you don't do what we say, we're going to kill 10 people. Okay, the other thing that we have to assume here is Peter believes the terrorists. Or maybe the terrorists like killed some people already, right? So he believes sincerely that if he doesn't do what the terrorists are telling him to do, they will kill 10 people. Let's add to that. They're going to kill the person on the chair as well. So Paul's going to die anyway. They're going to kill Paul, but they're going to kill 9 other people. Maybe they'll kill Peter as well. They don't know. So he sincerely believes, if he doesn't do what they say, more people are going to die. What is he supposed to do? This is a thought experiment. So you guys think about it. Think of yourself in Peter's shoes. What would you do if you were in that kind of situation? It seems that Peter has no choice but to shoot. If he shoots Paul, is he responsible for killing Paul? Will he be held morally accountable for shooting his best friend Paul dead? Could he be arrested and go to jail later on? I don't think anybody would convict him, send him to jail, right? Because he could not have done otherwise. He would not be held morally responsible. No jury in a court of law would find him guilty, right? Because the terrorists, like everybody believed that they would kill 10 people if Peter didn't do what they were telling him to do. He had no choice. He would not be held morally responsible. Think about that. Okay, so here is scenario 1, the first scenario. So he is putting a gun to his friend's head. Peter doesn't want to shoot Paul. He doesn't want to shoot Paul because after all, Paul's his best friend, right? But he has no choice. He says, Paul, I'm so sorry. I don't, know why this is happening of all the days, right? I forgive you. Paul, I forgive you. You're having an affair with my wife. Of course, she's a lovely person. You guys are in love. Okay, I forgive you. And I am so sorry that I have to pull the trigger, right? Because if I don't kill you, the terrorists are going to kill you anyway, and then 9 more people, right? I'm so sorry, my best friend. And he pulls the trigger. Paul's dead. Oh, he had to do it, right? So that's situation one. In that situation, we would say he cannot be held morally responsible for what he has done. His action is excused. He had no choice. Here's the second scenario. Peter is delighted. Inside, he's incredibly happy, right? Because he hates Paul. He wanted to kill him anyway. He's thanking God. God, thank you. This is like the perfect crime. I was going to kill him anyway. And here are the terrorists, right? They're forcing my hand. So, he's a good actor. He's crying, but the tears are actually tears of joy, right? Tears of joy. I get to kill him in public and nobody can get me, right? I just have to act like I'm horrified. But he's gleeful, right? Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. But inside he's saying, yes, yes, you know, like he swears and he kills him. So in the second case, would we say that what Peter has done is morally good or evil, or bad, morally good or bad? In the second case, we would say that is a terrible thing he's done. It's the same action, and he's pretending to cry, right? But inside, he's actually the devil himself. So even though he could not have done otherwise, in terms of like moral action, he had to do it. We interpret that as yes, what he did was a good thing. He saved other people's lives. In the second case, he's a murderer, and he got away with it, right? So this is a Frankfurt's case, you see. Frankfurt's idea of free will has this ability to explain this how we think correctly, right? We think this is the correct interpretation, right? One is good, two is bad. And Frankfurt's interpretation of the second order desire has the ability to do that. Your traditional libertarian view of free will has a hard time interpreting this correctly, you see. We're going to come back to this kind of situation at the end of the course with the very famous thing called the trolley problem. Who's heard of the trolley problem? Trolley. Okay, so yeah, we're going to come back to this kind of thing at the end of the course. Let's move on. So let's just check the time. Lots of time. I shouldn't have said that. Every time I say lots of time, I run out of time. So back to Chrysippus. Our free will is part of nature, like different stones. We are part of a deterministic universe. We are free when we get what we want, but wanting the desire itself is beyond our control. This kind of view of our mind, our brain, is called psychological determinism. It is a kind of determinism, right? We act according to what is given to us. The libertarian problem is, when in this kind of situation is, it's one thing for me to say I have free will. I can claim responsibility for my character, but it's quite another for others to praise or blame me for what I am absolutely. That is the problem libertarians have. If you believe in libertarian free will, I'm sure if you think about it for a second, you recognize this, right? In life, we recognize this kind of problem. It's all over the place. A person committed a crime. He should go to jail forever, right? But then we find out there's something wrong with his brain. When he was a child, he got into an accident, his brain was damaged, right? So he had no control over what he did. He turned into this sort of sociopath, right? So he developed some kind of mental pathology, I guess we call it, this condition that turned him into this sort of monstrous human being. Should not be taken into account. The libertarian free will, right? So this blaming someone, absolutely, that is a problem for the libertarian view. The thing about flat stone, round stone, that is what compatibilism is good at explaining, right? Libertarians have to explain these differences too. And that's the problem with libertarian free will. How do you account for these differences? Differences of character, um, the thing that is beyond the person's control, right? Um, of a round stone cannot will itself to become a flat stone. A flat stone cannot will itself to turn into a round stone. There are limitations to what we can will ourselves to do. Will ourselves, yeah, will ourselves to be, therefore will ourselves to do. This is uh, a verse from the Bible. So even, yeah, I don't want to talk about this too much. Even the Bible has some passages, because the Bible usually is connected with libertarian view of free will. I think I said a few times, the libertarian view of free will is closely associated with religious beliefs, right? But even the Bible has some passages that seem to be arguing for something like compatibilist view of free will. So this one says, who are you to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to him, God, who formed it, why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have the right to make from the same lump of clay a vessel for special occasions and another for common use? It's up to God to make you into the kind of person that you are. Who are you to complain to God about how God made you? Flat stone, round stone. A father can criticize his son and say, my son, you are lazy, right? You need to be more diligent, right? You don't have any self-control, right? Study harder, right? Don't play so many, computer games. A father can criticize his son in many different ways, but a father cannot criticize his son for, let's say, being short, right? Son, how come you're so short? Become taller. Because the son will turn around and say, but father, I'm your son, right? You're a short man, right? How do you expect me to be tall? You're like only 5'5" or something, right? There are certain things you can demand of your child, but you cannot tell your child to like be whatever you want the child to be. There are limitations to that. And of this kind of limitations, this guy named Galen Strawson, so this is the basic argument. He's a British philosopher. He's a hard person to pin down, but apparently in his heart of hearts, he's a hard determinist. He is a hard determinist. But this argument that he calls the basic argument, he ties free will to moral responsibility called the basic argument. And he says this argument that he's giving is called basic because he says it's nothing new. This argument is actually old. It's been around since the ancient times. I'm just giving it to you the bare version of the basic argument. What is the basic argument? He says it is impossible to have the kind of free will. He says the kind that will send one to heaven or hell, connected to absolute moral responsibility. So the argument he's making is against the libertarian free will because he's a hard determinist, right? He's saying, you libertarians, you believe in this absolute free will, and therefore therefore we are responsible for sending ourselves up to heaven or to send ourselves to hell. So you say that, but that kind of free will is impossible. He's saying that's the argument that he makes. Oh, yeah, it's the kind that can send us to heaven or hell. You do what you do because of the way you are. According to nature, we act according to our nature. You do what you do because of the way you are. To be ultimately responsible for what you do, you have to be ultimately responsible for the way you are, at least in certain crucial mental respects. This isn't him. I put this in. This kind of thing is known as causa sui. Causa sui means cause of itself. I can cause something to happen without my being caused by something else. That is the only way I can be absolutely responsible for what I do. I have to be causa sui, a self-causing agent. I think we went through this, right? When we were talking about libertarian free will. But you can't be ultimately responsible for the way you are because you didn't create yourself. You cannot be ultimately responsible for the way you are. And therefore, before I get, okay, I'm showing these pictures just to, as an example. Like, I may want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I cannot be Arnold Schwarzenegger because I don't have his body, right? No matter how much I try, right? Maybe I could have, more muscles, but I don't think I would ever be like this guy, right? Because I wasn't born with the kind of body that he has. I cannot, I love cats, but as much as I love cats, I cannot turn myself into a cat. That is physically impossible, right? Unless if I believe in some kind of magic. I cannot turn myself into a whale. There are things that are possible for me to do, but then there are many things that are impossible for me to do, right? So I cannot be ultimately responsible for the way I am. I'm a human being. I did not choose to be a human being, right? I am thrown into this world as who I am. And therefore, the conclusion is you cannot be ultimately responsible for what you do. So this is a very logically sound, or it's a logically valid argument, right? You cannot be ultimately responsible for what you do because you cannot be ultimately responsible for what you are. Because you did not create yourself. You are the creation of your parents, right? Who created your parents? They're their parents, and it goes on and on and on. So how can you argue for the kind of free will that will send you to heaven or hell? Because you cannot be ultimately responsible for what you do. So that's called the basic argument. Um, Now, this basic argument, before I get into how the determinists and compatibilists and the libertarians respond to the basic argument, let me just quickly talk about existentialism. This is my way of just putting this in a little bit because it makes for an interesting example of how existentialism, it's really popular today. Existentialism is. We'll come back to existentialism when we get to the meaning of life later on in the course. But this is an example of a very popular philosophical viewpoint that totally messes up with regard to something like the basic argument. It contradicts itself. Existentialism is basically, I don't want to get into it too deeply. It's basically, someone like Sartre would say, existence precedes essence. That's his motto for what existentialism is. Existence precedes essence. The meaning of that is simplistically, existence is the most important thing, and essence is whatever we make ourselves to be. There is no such thing as essence because Sartre was an atheist. He believed there is no ultimate meaning to the universe. There is no God who created us with some kind of, soul, divine soul. We just exist in a meaningless universe because the universe has no purpose, no meaning, and we are just existing in this universe. We can do whatever we want. We can become whatever we want to become. So it's, like I said, it's a popular philosophical viewpoint, and there are many good points to existentialism. Jean-Paul Sartre, French philosopher, he's got lovely eyes. Sartre has. So right, I exist first, and I can choose my nature, who I am, because we don't have anything like essence. Therefore, I am responsible for what I am. I can be responsible for what I am because I can be whatever I want to be. That is like I said, the cry of existentialism. I should have qualified secular existentialism. We are our choices, Sartre says. We are our choices. It's 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 a good thing to hear somebody say. It sounds good, right? And for someone whose life situation is not very good, let's say you're a slave. Your life is that of a slave, right? You don't have to be resigned to your life as a slave. You listen to Sartre and say, I can do whatever I want. I can become whatever I want to become. I refuse to be a slave, right? And you start a brand new life as another identity. Uh, if you are a farmer, and again, I just you were born into a farming family, right? Your grandfather was a farmer, your father was a farmer, your brothers are farmers, and you think, okay, that is my life situation. So I am meant to be a farmer. And then you read Sartre, you become an existentialist, and you say, no, I can choose to be anything I want and leave your farm and become, a poet or something if you want. You can be whatever you want to be. You don't have to follow the crowd, right? Whatever the crowd is saying, you can leave the crowd and seek out your own path. That is the allure of existentialism. So why am I talking about existentialism? Because existentialism makes this fatal mistake. We're talking about free will, right? Existentialism makes this fatal mistake. Um, it simply assumes that we have free will. Right? Sartre never questions that we have free will. But where does free will come from? His kind of free will is the libertarian free will. He says we can do whatever we want to do. We are ultimately responsible for what we do. That is what the basic argument says you cannot do, right? In order for me to have this absolute kind of free will, the way Sartre wants our life to be, right? We're absolutely free. There's no such thing as essence. That kind of absolute free will, if you follow the arguments, requires a soul, requires you to be a causal agent. If you remember the libertarian video, right? It requires us to be a causal agent, for us to be causa sui. That means we have to be a spiritual creature. There has to be some kind of divine spirit inside of us, godlike divine spirit that will allow us to break the law of the universe, right? Everything else in the universe follows the law of causality. But I alone, as a human being, as a child of God, can break the law of causality, right? You have to believe in a soul. But then if you say, okay, yeah, okay, like Sartre maybe he'll say, yeah, of course, I believe in a soul. What is a soul but my essence, right? Secular existentialism denies God. It denies us that we have a soul, that there is an essence to anything. So it's a blind spot with secular existentialism, the way they almost flippantly, in a very non-thinking way, use the word freedom and free will. They think we have absolute free will, but we don't, right? According to what existentialism is saying. So someone like Nietzsche, who's not really an existentialist, but he is considered a proto-existentialist. He would argue against this kind of argument that we can do whatever we want to do, because Nietzsche himself, I think, would be qualified as a kind of compatibilist, if not a determinist. He's definitely against this kind of free will, the view of this kind of free will. What he says, Nietzsche, is he says the idea of the self causing itself, causa sui, is the best self-contradiction that has been conceived. He says our desire for free will is like pulling oneself up into existence by the hair out of the swamps of nothingness, he says. So believing that we have free will. Remember, or maybe I haven't talked about it already. We will talk about Nietzsche later. He is against religion. He calls himself the immoralist. So he fights against especially Christianity. So that's why he argues against the kind of free will that Christianity talks about. Believing that we have this absolute free will is like pulling yourself into existence out of nothing. You're pulling yourself by the hair, trying to pull yourself up. So it's a self-contradiction. So he says, Kasasui, it's a foolish thing to believe in. So basic argument goes against Sartre's type of existentialism because Sartre, like I said, almost flippantly uses the word free will as if we have absolute free will. But there are other types of existentialism, the kind practiced by someone like Nietzsche, for example. If you would consider him an existentialist, he has many ingredients of an existentialist. That's what we say Nietzsche is a proto-existentialist. His kind of existentialism will be complementary to basic argument because he doesn't argue against the kind of thinking that the argument that is the basic argument. Okay, so that's Sartre's existentialism and Nietzsche's sort of rebuttal against that kind of view because it's contradictory. Hard determinist responds to the basic argument. We talked about the Holbach. We think we're free agents only because we cannot perceive the chain of causes within our minds. Right? He said we're basically ignorant of the psychological processes going on inside our mind. Our sense of agency is an illusion, and he didn't term it. It came with Thomas. I forgot his name. Thomas. You've been studying, right? What's his name? Darwin's best friend. Was it Thomas Young? I forgot the name. Oh, no, I think I say his name later on. Uh, no. Oh, shoot, I don't say it here. Uh, so the Holbach is the guy who makes that argument. The term epiphenomenalism was coined by this other guy that I talked about last week. And the name escapes me right now, but you should know who he is. Darwin's bulldog. That was his title, Darwin's bulldog. Even self is only a bundle of ideas. We're referencing here David Hume and the idea of Buddhism. We talked about these things. Our mind is like the jet trail out of a jet plane. Or we are deceiving ourselves or deluding ourselves in thinking that we are a self. Theravada Buddhism says anatta, right? No self. In reality, no self. These hard determinists, if that is your view of free will, that in fact, free will is an illusion, even our sense of self is an illusion, you have to, what we say, bite the bullet, we say. You have to bite the bullet on morality. You have to say there is no such thing as morality. How can you have morality if there is really no such thing as free will? We cannot have anything like right and wrong because these, like the illusion of free will, like the illusion of a self, are only illusions. We may say, yes, that is the right action, but it's just by convention. That is not real. What we say is the right action, the wrong action. These are just words. But there's no truth to them, right? These are only illusions. Baruch Spinoza, he was another, I guess, hard determinist, way before, but one of the rationalists. He said, men believe themselves to be free simply because they are conscious of their actions and unconscious of the causes whereby those actions are determined. It's exactly the same thing that the Holbach says later on, right? Because we're ignorant, we think we are the ones doing these actions because we're ignorant of the things that cause those actions. And those actions are caused not by me, but something about my body, something about the environment, something about the chemistry, something about the cells, proteins, and all that. I mentioned Dirk Pereboom as one of the hard determinists, right? So he's a philosopher at Cornell University. He wrote a paper called Why We Have No Free Will and Can Live Without without it. So it's a paper that he wrote. I don't want to get into these things too deeply because I just realized we only have 25 minutes and I do want to finish on time. So we'll go through this fairly quickly. In this paper, which is part of your like course reader, if anybody wants the optional reading, these things, usually when I have these little papers and title and quotations, that means the paper is part of your optional reading. You can read this if you want to. So his argument is basically, so he's a hard incompatibilist. He's saying free will is false. It still can let us have some kind of moral life. He says we can still live some kind of moral life. We can still lock people up. We can still punish people. People who are a danger to society. We can discourage wrong behavior. We can still tell people don't do it. Even though they don't have free will, we can still tell them don't do it. But what will disappear is our sense of justice. If we recognize that there is no such thing as free will, then we won't push for, the kind of punishment that sometimes we have, like an eye for an eye. You took out an eye, therefore I will take out your eye. We'll forget about vengeance. We'll forget about things like hatred, right? Because we recognize there is no free will. So he says this kind of view that free will is only an illusion is completely compatible with utilitarian morality, consequentialism. We punish people only because it lets us meet certain ends that we desire. We can still look for meaning in life. Like, Buddhists can be happy people, right? And Buddhists, they don't believe in free will, and yet, they live they can live a happy human life. So we don't necessarily have to resign ourselves and become fatalists. And our sense of worth, and this is a good point that he makes in this paper. Our sense of worth is often or not always linked to free will. He gives examples of something like beauty, right? We recognize a beautiful thing or a beautiful person when we see them, but beauty has nothing to do with free will. And yet we can still appreciate beauty for what it is. When somebody is intelligent, intelligence also has nothing to do with free will. I think, again, I don't think he's thinking enough because I think intelligence has much to do with free will, actually. But he says some people are smart, some people are stupid, right? That has nothing to do with their free will. It's just who they are. So it doesn't mean the world will end. So incompatibilism still gives us human relationships. We can still experience emotions like happiness, love, forgiveness, even if we don't believe in free will. But we can be free of such feelings as guilt, anger, remorse, because I recognize I have no free will. See, this is where he kind of loses me when I read his paper. This is where he kind of loses me. He's saying we can get rid of feelings like guilt, as if guilt is a bad thing. This is where, like, I think he's being a little bit too artificial here, right? He's a philosopher, but I think he is twisting himself a little bit too much to make his point. If I kill somebody, right? One morning I decide, I take a knife and I kill somebody, right? Should I tell myself I feel no guilt? Because it wasn't me doing it. I have no free will, right? I just felt like doing it, and I killed somebody, but I feel no remorse because even myself is in, I mean, that's not a healthy way to be, right? If I feel myself to be a puppet, some kind of zombie-like robot, then I could resign myself to doing whatever I want to do and excuse my actions and have no feelings of guilt. That's not right. I mean, commonsensically, that's not acceptable, right? But he's saying, like, okay, we can be free of guilt and things like anger. Okay, the problem with this paper, it's not a very good paper, I have to say. He is being very selective with his arguments. It's almost as if he's willfully blind to the weaknesses in his argument. If there is no free will, what is the difference between us and zombies? In philosophy, we talk about philosophical zombies. Imagine that there are these zombies. They act like us, they can talk like us, but there's nothing inside. There's no consciousness. They're just like machines. They act like human beings, but they're not really human beings. They're zombies. So if we kill a zombie, we're not doing anything morally wrong because zombies are just zombies. They're not human beings. There's nothing inside. It's a philosophical problem, right? And I say it's a philosophical problem because that is a very problematic thing to say, right? Philosophical zombies are not like regular zombies, right? Regular zombies you see in the movies and right? And then of course the thing to do is kill zombies, right? That would be maybe morally the right thing to do. But the zombie comes walking up to you and says, "Hey Peter, how you doing?" Right? And I'm thinking, okay, this is a philosophical zombie. Peter, how you feeling? You're looking weird, right? Is everything okay? I'm thinking there's nothing inside. I take out a sword and that's very problematic, right? So this thing about philosophical zombie is it lets us think, wait a minute, maybe this thing about there's something inside, there's nothing inside, that itself is problematic, right? So this having no free will, what is the difference between us and zombies? Maybe we are all zombies. That's what hard determinism leads us to saying, right? What is the difference between us and these zombies that there's nothing inside their head? How do you fall in love with someone who's not there? Like, how do you say to somebody, I love you? Love isn't just a feeling, right? Love is a commitment. You are making a commitment, right? I think I talked about this in class. I think I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry. But if I haven't, this is the first time I'm saying it, then this is a very good argument against hard determinism, right? You are getting married at a wedding. I hope everyone will get married in the future. If not, if none of you are married already, it's a great experience, right? Your hands are shaking, the people watching you, at a church. And the minister says, do you, Peter Lee, accept? And then this person as your wife. What am I saying? I have to say, maybe? I don't know. I can't say anything. I have no free will. I have to say, I do, right? I do. The phrase I do, the sentence, I do has no meaning if I don't believe in free will. Right? I do is a commitment, it's a promise I make. If I don't believe in free will, how can I say I do? I can't do anything if I don't have free will. And why would I say I do to somebody if I believe that person isn't there, right? So hard determinism it's a really difficult philosophical viewpoint, I think, to hold on to. Hard determinists, I think, end up living their lives the way compatibilists live their lives, but they just can't admit that free will is a real thing. So they say free will is an illusion. Everything is an illusion. We just live in this world. So that is right. Right. And then the kicker is I'm not there either, right? She's not there. I don't have free will. And because I don't exist, I'm not there either. If there is no free will, how do I deliberate? Even the word deliberate makes no sense. Deliberate means I'm thinking about what to do, right? It presupposes I can make choices. If I'm deliberating something, I'm trying to choose between A and B. If I have no free will, what is the meaning of deliberation? It makes no sense. Even the word ought implies can. Without can, there is no moral acts possible. So language itself becomes an illusion, becomes meaningless, and therefore, I already talked about that. So what we usually say is, if you are truly a hard determinist, you have to pay a price. And the price you pay for believing in hard determinism is often too high. So hard determinists are like backsliding Christians, right? Backsliding Christians go to church sometimes. They say, I believe God, I love Jesus, but you don't live your life like a Christian, right? You go, you drink, you womanize, you have affairs, you cuss, you swear, and you steal, you rob, you commit crimes, and then you turn around and say, "Yes, I believe I'm still a Christian." That's what we call a backsliding Christian, right? Or maybe I don't want to say the word hypocrite, but it is a kind of hypocrisy, isn't it? If you live like a compatibilist or even a libertarian, and you continue to call yourself a hard determinist, there's a conflict there. Well, a tension, there's a tension there. So if you truly want to be a hard determinist, we say the price is really high, a bit maybe too high to pay. Okay, the compatibilist response says there is no problem with the basic argument because we agree that everything is determined. Compatibilist morality is still okay. Like we said with Chrysippus, somebody with a criminal nature still needs to be dealt with for the good of society. And this is the story of the frog and the scorpion. Let me just check the time. Lots of time. Let me tell you the story of the frog and the scorpion. I think many of you have heard this story. The story is there's a scorpion that wants to cross a river, but scorpions cannot swim. And frogs are good swimmers, right? So the scorpion approaches a frog, and the scorpion says, "Could you carry me across the river?" And the frog says, "No, I'm not going to carry you across the river. You try to kill me and eat me, right? You're a scorpion. You will sting me while we're crossing the river, and then we'll both drown." And the scorpion says, "Wait a minute, frog, you're not making any sense. Why would I want to sting you? Because if I sting you while we're crossing the river, we'll both drown, right? So, you can trust that I will not sting you. I give you my word that I will not sting you. Please, I need to get across the river." And the frog, being the frog, good-natured, trusting, naive frog that the frog is, says, "Okay, my friend, I trust you." They start crossing the river, and the scorpion stings the frog in the middle of the river. And the frog says, as they both drowned, the frog asks, "Why did you do this? We're both drowning." And the scorpion says, "I couldn't help it. It's in my nature. I couldn't help it. It's in my nature." What is this story about? This is a story that supports compatibilism, right? We act according to our nature. That's who we are. So compatibilism lives within that context, right? So the kind of free will that we have with compatibilism is a kind of lesson. It's a kind of weaker form of free will, but it is free will nevertheless. So let me just say, Hume says freedom of action or an absence of external constraint means we have free will. So what constrains us, like prisoners in chains, is immoral, and what keeps us free is moral. What constrains us is immoral. What keeps us free is moral. This is the classical definition, right? And I think so this classical version can be reinterpreted according to Frankfurt's version of free will. We have freedom of will just in case we get the first order desire we want. That want, second want, that, and not second want. So first order desire we want, that is the second order desire, right? So you apply that to this traditional classical version of compatibilism. What constrains us is what our second order desire does not want happens. That is immoral. And what keeps us free, we get the first order desire that we want. What our second order says is the desire that we want. We actually get that, then that is what he would call freedom. For Hume, I'm sorry, I skipped this. Morality becomes a matter of tradition and culture for Hume. Frankfurt, it's the second order desire. Free will is an exercise of second order desire. What stops us from getting that is immoral. Again, I just went through that interpretation of Hume, right? There's a man named Peter Strawson, and I mention him for two reasons, because he was a very famous philosopher and he was a compatibilist. And also he was Galen Strawson's father. So there's an interesting story there. Galen Strawson, who's associated with the basic argument, he's a hard determinist, and yet his father was a compatibilist. He accepted determinism, but he said, as its problems with free will is only a pseudo problem. What we consider problems are really just pseudo problems. They're not real problems, because in real life, we all act as if we have free will, and free will is not a problem. So we live in our lives as compatibilists. Moral attitudes such as responsibility, praise, blame, guilt, pride, gratitude, forgiveness, these are the basic facts of our existence. These are the basic facts. And so what Strawson says is these are foundational. These are foundational. We need these things for us to live. So I don't want to belabor the point, but the point of that is we said we thought for centuries that whales are fish. And then one day we discovered whales are not fish. Whales are not what we thought they were. Doesn't make whales only an illusion, right? The whales are still there, right? They're still the same animal. It's just that our view of the whales were wrong, right? If we thought our free will was of the libertarian kind, and compatibilism compels us to see free will as a compatibilist free will, sort of a weakened form of free will, doesn't mean free will all of a sudden becomes an illusion. What we have is what we always had, but we just have to see it differently. So that's what he calls the basic facts of our existence. And I have a picture of Immanuel Kant to make this point. This is very similar to Kant's categories. If you remember categories, Kant says we experience our phenomenal reality through the grid of space-time and the 12 categories. That is how we experience life, experience the world. Oh, and also, I'm sorry, that and the criticism of practical reason. In order for us to live our lives, we have to see that we have this moral law within. We cannot deny the moral law within, and therefore we have to believe in free will. What is different between Kant's idea that, this moral law within, the 12 categories, our idea of how the world works is foundational, is fundamental. What is the difference between that and Peter Strawson's basic facts of our existence? I would posit, I would say, the only difference is Kant is a devout Christian. So he brings God into the picture, right? And once you bring God into the picture, it has to be absolute. My sense of this moral law within has to be an absolute sense of morality. And my sense of having free will has to be of the absolute kind. Otherwise, so the argument goes, how can we account for someone going to hell, someone going to heaven and someone going to hell? So compatibilism limits us to relativistic morality. I'm sorry about this term, relativistic morality. I'm using the word relativistic in contrast to absolute morality. It doesn't mean relativistic as in, like, my right is your wrong is, I'm sorry, my right and your right can be different. My sense of wrong can be different from your sense of wrong. Not that kind of relativistic. Because Peter Strawson isn't a relativist in that sense, right? Peter Strawson is saying there are these basic facts that we all accept. So it's relativistic only in the sense of, I think I mentioned this guy, Protagoras. He said, man is the measure of all things. Human beings are the measure of all things. That kind of relativistic, meaning we are the measure of all things. It can only give us, at the end of the day, consequentialist or utilitarian morality, not the deontological or absolutist kind of morality. All right. Libertarian response says, Libertarian free will exists. That is the belief of libertarian free will, right? We are causal agents. The basic argument has to be false. Libertarian argument cannot coexist with the basic argument. So the libertarians have to deny the basic argument. So they are the enemies of the basic argument, the basic argument, the basic argument, right? And that makes sense because Galen Strawson's argument is against the libertarians, right? He gave his argument to refute libertarian view of free will, and therefore libertarians say this argument has to be wrong somehow. There is something wrong with this argument, at least when it comes to us human beings. And so we go back to the libertarian response. It means the assumption of determinism is wrong. Thomas Reid, we talked about it. I'm a causal agent. I have a soul, and I have this sense of agency that I can cause things to happen without my being caused by other things. Another way of saying that is causa sui. I am a causa sui. This notion that I have this agency is early emerging and universal. There are no strings on me. Charles Campbell, what kind of free will do we need? Ones that give us moral responsibility. Again, the angel and devil on my shoulders, but I have this ability to choose the third way. And he says it's a mystery. The act of free will is a mystery. And we said Immanuel Kant gives probably the best argument for libertarian free will. Free will exists because it must exist. The starry heavens above me, moral law within me. And reason cannot grasp the numinal world, but that's the pure reason. But in order to live our lives, our sense of right and wrong, the moral law within me has to be foundational. So we need free will because we have morality. And if we don't have free will, the kind of libertarian free will that we are talking about, then our sense of morality is an illusion. So it's not the other way around. A libertarian free will is intrinsically linked to some divine power. So this isn't Kant, this is me, right? In a way, criticizing Kant. Libertarian free will is intrinsically or very closely, almost always, linked to some kind of divine power. Otherwise, morality becomes relative. If morality becomes relative or relativistic, again, please don't confuse that with what I was just saying, like individual subjective morality. No, relativistic as in the Protagoras says, man is the measure of all things. We are the measure of all things. Becomes human-centric. If it becomes relativistic, then that is not very different from compatibilism, right? So the difference between libertarian free will, if you take that idea of the absolute, can easily turn into compatibilism. If we do not have ultimate responsibility for our actions, how can God reward us with heaven or punish us with hell? So that is the sticky point. That is the wall between libertarian free will and compatibilist free will, is that we have to think about things like heaven and hell, Adam and Eve, biting of the apple, sin entering the world. These are all religious concepts. One thing that I think this is the end, right? Right? This is the end. One thing that I want to add right at the end is this isn't part of the slide. I studied a little bit something called neo-Kantianism. I studied this a little bit last summer. So I didn't include that in our slides because I don't want to complicate the picture too much. So this isn't something you need to study for the test. I didn't know, but neo-Kantianism is something that happened fairly, like, I guess in the 19th century. And neo-Kantians, they took everything that Kant had to say, but they took out the religious part of it. And so neo-Kantians' idea of free will would be what we would consider today closer to compatibilism, because their sense of morality becomes not the kind of like 10 commandments that God has written in our hearts. But neo-Kantians, they were secularists, right? So they took Kant's ideas and secularized it. And what they ended up with was very much like what a compatibilist would say, that morality itself becomes a human thing, right? Our sense of morality comes from like human society. So I just wanted to like mention that neo-Kantianism. Of course, Kant would say, nonsense, right? Like I said, his philosophy is closely tied to his religious beliefs. So we went through, I think this is supposed to be determinism, compatibilism, and this libertarian free will. We went through these things, and today we talked about what are the consequences. I want you guys to, oh shoot, I wish we had just one more minute. Please, I want you guys to please do this. If you click on the poll on free will, last time I checked, about 40 of you did the poll, took the poll. I think I just touched something I shouldn't have. Please take the poll. Let's have 60 people taking the poll and let's see what the final percentages are. Okay? It'll just take you a minute to take the poll. Um, whether you are a libertarian, hard determinist, compatibilist, or maybe you're still holding out and saying, I'm not any of the above. So please take the poll. Some of you I will see Thursday. Come if you want to, ask questions, review all the slides. I think we have something like 180 slides or something. Quickly go through them. Otherwise, I will see you Tuesday next week for the exam. Have a good day, everyone.